Well, good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Denton Black Film Festival family, it's my pleasure to welcome you today to our first DBFF Soul Talk series. Today, I'd like to introduce you to our co-host. We've got Anthony Ant Johnson and Cathy Woods. They're both members of the African American Film Critics Association. Anthony Ant Johnson, he found his absolute passion for film a little bit later in life after he graduated from the University of Texas in Austin and Texas Christian University. His decision to choose a film critique came in 2013, and it was born out of a lack of seeing film critics that looked like him. He firmly believes who you are, where you're from, and your life experiences factor into what you deem is a good film. You can find his film reviews on his website, themoviebrother.com, and be sure and follow him on Instagram and The Movie Brother. And that's Brother, Brutha. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Good. We're glad to have you. And our other co-host is Cathy Woods. She's an entrepreneur, a radio host. She's fluent in 5 languages, guys. She's a graduate of Temple University, and she's the creator of the Cup of Soul Show. It's a weekly podcast streaming on various services. It covers pop culture by featuring minority creatives in movies and television. Now, Kathia has covered South by Southwest, ABFF, Sundance, Tribeca events, and even more. While Ant is a longtime friend of DBFF, it's with pleasure that we welcome Kathia into the DBFF family. So now I'm going to turn over the rest of this programming to Ant and Kathia. Take it away.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much for this beautiful introduction. And I'm happy to be a part of the family. Thank you, Ant, for asking me to do this with you.
My pleasure. Good to see you again, Kathia.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Today, we are so lucky and very honored to be able to speak about a film that we've had the pleasure of seeing at Sundance. It is a film that stood with me. I actually did tweet out that how much I loved it and that we should get together as a family. And I'm happy to say that we get to speak to these amazing filmmakers today. It is with pleasure that we introduce Channing and Neil. Channing is the director. Channing Godfrey Peoples is the director of Miss Juneteenth, and Neil, who also happens to be her husband, is the producer. So, guys, we are so thrilled to be able to speak about your film.
Thank you for having us. Thank you. Hi, Ant. Hi, Kathy. I'm really excited to see you all.
It's so nice to meet you guys. How are you?
It's nice to meet you too. And Kathy, it's great to see you again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was very, this was so easy to say yes to. He was like, before you finished, I was like, yes.
Yeah. So before we went live, I was telling Neil, part of the reason I'm so excited to do this as a film critic, right? I see hundreds and hundreds of films, but it's rare that I get to speak with the creators behind the film, and that's all good. That's okay.
That's okay. Everyone watching, I have a 2-year-old who I'm trying to keep off the camera.
No worries.
Hear her.
Totally fine. We are practicing social distancing and we're being safe in this. So it's all good on this end. But, like I was saying, it's rare that, for me, I get a chance to speak with the creators behind, these films and everything. So I'm excited to chop it up with you guys. Kathia and I are excited to do that. And so kind of format, we want to first just talk about, or I should say maybe introduce this film. We'll do, high level synopsis. And I understand we have a clip cut of the film. We'll take a look at that for those of our viewers that maybe haven't had an opportunity to see the film yet, and then we'll come back and we'll have a conversation. Now, as we're doing that, you guys, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, you can comment. Those of you that are viewing, you can comment, post questions. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So engage, we'll be looking out for the questions and everything. And then also once we wrap in the conversation, we'll do some Q&A too. So we're going to do our best on this end to get, everybody's questions in and all that good stuff. So that's the plan. So Miss Juneteenth, Neil, what is Miss Juneteenth about?
Okay, Miss Juneteenth is a story about Turquoise Jones, who, Channing's here, unless she wants to tell it. I'll tell it though.
Neil, I wanted to hear you talk about it, but Miss Juneteenth is about a woman named Turquoise Jones who, is a former beauty queen and she's now a hardworking single mom, and she's preparing her rebellious teenage daughter for the Juneteenth pageant to keep her from getting some of her things today. The film is actually set in my hometown of Fort Worth, Texas, which is actually a large city, but it feels like.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, Channing. Unmute your mic so we can hear you. So we can hear your beautiful description of your film.
Oh my goodness, y'all. I'm so sorry.
It happens, no worries.
I'm getting used to all this.
It's all good. It's all good.
Miss Juneteenth is about a woman in Texas named Turquoise Jones, and she's a former beauty queen, and she's now a hardworking single mom when we meet her, and she's preparing her rebellious teenage daughter for the Miss Juneteenth pageant, and she's hoping to keep her from repeating some of her same mistakes in life.
Outstanding. We're going to watch the clip, the trailer.
We're working through a couple of technical difficulties here. I think Alexis is going to run this back so we can have the audio with the trailer. So bear with us.
That's how you know we're live.
Yes, yes.
Right? This wasn't pre-recorded.
And while we're working through that, I was so excited to see this film because I'm from Texas. Grew up in the Houston area, and I actually lived in the Fort Worth area, North Fort Worth, for almost 20 years. So, it's always great, when you get to see a film that you see familiar landscape and locations and stuff. And being from Texas, that's something that's funny. 2020. And all of the, it's almost like the rest of the country and world finding out about Juneteenth. And that's something, we celebrated, my entire life.
Yeah, that's the conversations that I keep having. Is it like everybody's like, how do you feel about everyone celebrating Juneteenth? And I'm like, well, it's just been so much a part of my life that, it's second nature. Ma'am, I know you want to be part of the conversation.
Oh, she sounds like a sweetheart. Also, if you're not from Texas, like if you've been to parts of the South, like what caught me, like watching it, if you experience that humidity, that heat, it's like you could almost feel it. And we, as I said, we saw that in the dead of winter, but somehow you felt that just the way you shot it, that you understood that. And also, we've all been through small towns, and it let you understand the closeness of the small town. We're going to try to see if we can play the trailer again a little bit later so people can get the full feel and not be cheated. But we're going to start the conversation into some of the themes that are examined in this film. One of the things is, and I've spoken to you a little bit about it, Channing, is the strong relationship between mothers and daughters, you know, not just Turquoise and Lexus, but Turquoise and her mother, and how her relationship with her mother formed her relationship with her daughter. And as much as she was trying to not bring in a lot of that baggage, she somehow inadvertently did. And what my question to you is, I guess to both of you, is like, what was your inspiration for that?
I mean, it was important for me. I think a lot of my earlier work, which this was my first feature film, but I had done just short films and things like that. And a lot of it deals with just like family cycles and the generations, like what you choose to leave behind and what you choose to take forward. And for me, you know, I think that relationship really was based on, you know, I wrote the film initially as a daughter, you know, having watched my mother was single for much of my life. And, you know, coincidentally, right before we found out, or right around the time we found out we were going to be able to make the film, I discovered I was pregnant. And so that later changed the way that I approached the film myself. You know, I think I think we talked about this earlier, but just, you know, to reiterate here, I had a very tough love version of Turquoise on paper, you know, just from my own experiences, you know. But one thing that I discovered after becoming a mom myself was the joy that I felt, you know, between me and my daughter. And also, you know, this sense of protectiveness, you know, just as a mom, like wanting to like make sure that my daughter had the best life. So I understood, you know, that relationship is in a new way, that mother-daughter relationship, and especially the relationship between Turquoise and Kai. Look, as I'm speaking about this, my daughter is trying to get on camera.
No, I mean, you know, I'm glad you said that, because there is this change in mother-daughter relationships, and our moms say it to us when we're teenagers, when we're learning our own identity, as we're becoming young women. You know, those dreaded words: wait until you have not just a child, but your own daughter. You're gonna understand. And as your daughter gets older, it is kind of like you start sounding like your mom, right? And you have those moments where you're like, wow, the thing has come full circle. The thing that did strike with me is that it took Turquoise a minute to understand, you know, when Alexis is like explaining what her hopes and dreams are, you know, that she never took the time in all this prevention and trying to make sure to get her on this right track, to sit down and ask her, what does she want? What are her dreams? What are her goals? It took her like a good portion of this film, because she was so focused on the one thing, before she realized, like, wait a minute, she does have wants and dreams, and those wants and dreams are not necessarily, they're not mine, but they're still goals. Did you think it was pivotal for people to see that, you know, she was growing, you know, that she was recognizing that she had faults?
Yeah, I think it's important. You know, it's something that I really try to focus on in my stories. You know, there really are shades of gray. You know, everyone is not black and white. And I thought that it was important to be able to see. She's a live wire today. I thought it was important for, you know, us to be able to see these characters as human, you know, and I was trying to find a way to layer that as much as possible. And, you know, Neil is here, who is one of the producers who's been, you know, with the film since its inception, really. And, you know, he was there really, all the producers were, you know, contributed to notes, but Neil especially, you know, as having been there as I developed the film, was there to, you know, be, I think, a trusted person to just say, because to, you know, say, this is what this feels like to me, you know. And also we went through development programs and things like that, which helped with notes. But I was always, as I can remember, pretty firm on wanting to show Turquoise as humanly as possible. So wanting to show, you know, this idea that, she wasn't initially receptive to Kai's dreams, and that was really based on, her own fears about her past and, the way, things that turned out for her and being able to reconcile her own past. And also those fears were tied into Kai's future and, wanting Kai to really have a better life. So she's going to hold her tighter to make sure that she didn't make the same mistakes that she felt like she made.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, you guys definitely did a great job with that because it was very real. She was absolutely, humanized, and, just being a parent and even raising my daughter and still raising my daughter. Right. I mean, you go through your life experiences, you make mistakes and things like that. And as I was raising my daughter, it's like, I don't want this to happen. So I'm going to, try to have, as we saw with Turquoise's character, right? I want to put as much control, and we're going to make sure, this isn't going to happen. You're not going to go down that route. And which even I could identify with my relationship with my daughter. I had to come to a point and realize, hey, she's not going to be a track star. She doesn't want to be a track star, for example, right? Those were my dreams, and I could relate to that in watching, Turquoise and Kai. Now, with that said, the Juneteenth pageant, is that something, Channing, that is that a real pageant that you had experience around, or can you speak to because it was, wants or desires for your kid? I saw this as that pageant as the kind of how that was being manifested, right? I did this, I went through the process, you're going to do it too. I mean, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Miss Juneteenth is a real pageant, and it's actually a scholastic beauty pageant because it really is focused on young Black women gaining college scholarships. These young women whose ancestors were the ones who got their freedom late in Texas. And so this is a way for them to be able to move forward in their futures and give them a leg up in the world, and especially in a society that often doesn't support them. So, I mean, I'd been going to Miss Juneteenth as long as I remembered, and in adulthood, when I'd gone off to film school and things like that, I obviously wasn't going. But when Neil and I relocated back to Texas after film school, we both went to USC in Los Angeles, and that's where we met. And we relocated back here in order to make the film because we really felt like we needed to be on the ground researching the film and, get reacquainted with Miss Juneteenth, and also, research it as far as like the locations that are inherent to the story, just like the bar, which is owned by family friends. But like I went in and worked in the bar for a couple of nights just to experience, Turquoise's journey. And I think at the same time, Neil, we were there together and we did a mood reel for the film to just kind of understand kind of tone and pacing for the film and things like that. But we went back and, volunteered with Miss Juneteenth and, really saw that the organizers of it are really impassioned people who want to create really this pageant for young women to get college scholarship, but also create a foundation for them to be able to learn and grow. They also, like you saw the etiquette class, which is in the film. Ma'am, you can't go on camera right now. I know you want to. But you saw the etiquette class, which is in the film, but there are other things like they have like essay and, they're really focused on their talents and things like that. And then there's also like a handbook, which talks to them about character and things like that. So there's just really a focus on these young women growing in the world. Her afro is striking the Zora.
I can take over a little bit.
I love it. I love that.
This is what happens when both parents.
All good.
Yeah,
It's all good.
I love that she's in her little world and she's like, we're all going to do this.
She's definitely very free spirited, and we try to not throw her on camera in these things because I learned things from Turquoise too, and I want her to be able to have her own life.
100%, 100%. We talked about the contest, and, you know, why that was important to have in the film, because, you know, it is a part of the culture of the town. Talk a little bit about the relationship and what was your point in developing Ronnie, you know, because he's the type of guy we all know. We all have girlfriends that date guys like Ronnie. You know, some of us are like, let go, Ronnie. But what was your thinking as in you were developing him, and what was important for you for people to see that wasn't maybe obvious, you know, that Kendrick helped bring to life?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I'm glad Neil's here because he was such a big part of developing Ronnie, not in practice, Neil. But
Here it is.
he was, you know, I was seeing Ronnie, you know, from a specific perspective, you know, like as a Black woman, and I'm writing Ronnie, and I really leaned on Neil to like make Ronnie as human as possible. Like, I think my inspiration originally came from like all the women in my life, you know, are so much, Turquoise is really so much a part of like the women I grew up with, just like my mom and my aunts and my grandma and, you know, me. There were women that had this like sense of determination, and they were like really passionate women, but they had a grit about them, and they also carried themselves with grace, right? But like almost, you know, all those women, I can remember them having like one kitchen table story of the man they had to, you know, move on from, you know, who they really, really, really loved. And so I'd written Ronnie, I think, from that perspective, but you know, I talked a little bit earlier about wanting these characters to be as human as possible and wanting them to have all these shades of gray. So like Neil, you were so much a big part of, you know, making sure that we understood that Ronnie, you know, Ronnie's motivations were more than just about him being selfish, you know. It was about like we see him with Kai, and he really loves his daughter. You know, we see that, and he and Turquoise are clashing, but they're both like clashing from this idea of like they're trying to figure out how they parent. So I'm gonna turn it over to you, Neil, a little bit, because you were really helpful in flushing him out.
Yeah, no, I thought the thing with Ronnie, I thought I really liked the character, obviously. But I also thought that it was back to what Channing was saying. It was all about how do you provide for Kai. And I really thought that Ronnie thought everything he was doing was giving Kai a better life, even if it was against what Turquoise wanted, which was this dress. So I think that was a big thing for us, just to try to make sure that every time like Ronnie was doing, you know, coming from a pure place, right? And it wasn't that hard, I think. I mean, Kendrick made it amazing. He really added a whole different layer to Ronnie because he's also from Houston. So Kendrick was able to bring in a Texas flavor and like just small details like grills and everything else to really bring more humanity to Ronnie. But I think that was like even in the script stage, really trying to make sure that Ronnie was just trying to parent the best way he knew how for Kai. And sometimes I was in conflict with what Turquoise wanted, which is in the conflict of the movie, you know?
Yeah. No, that's thank you for sharing that. I was hot with Ronnie a few different times, but you summed it up well because I did feel that. Number one, I knew that he loved his daughter. And number two, I knew that I felt like he had good intentions. Now, whether those were the right intentions, right, or the desires of Turquoise, that's a whole nother conversation. And I walk on a fine line here because I notice maybe some people haven't seen the film, so I'm being very careful in how I choose my words. But and for those that don't know, right, Ronnie is the father of Kai's, Turquoise's daughter, Kai, love interest. But as a part of that whole dynamic and that relationship, right, that romantic relationship, I appreciated that Turquoise was able to recognize that she has options, right? And you guys mentioned, right? We all know different people of, you know, relationships, and maybe it's not the most healthy relationship, but it's a struggle, or some people at times even feel like they're stuck. I don't have any options, right? And will potentially stay in an unhealthy relationship out of fear of just being alone. And I like how Turquoise's character, matured and again got to that place where she had options. Now, I feel like sometimes in films, it's art, right? It's the interpretation of the viewer, right? The film fan like me that's seeing the film. Sometimes as a creator, so like for example, what I just shared about relationships and options. That's just how I interpreted it. Is the intent and how you guys wrote these characters out in the story? Did you intend for that message to come through, or is that just kind of part of the natural, one of the byproducts of this story that we see in Miss Juneteenth? And both of you guys can answer, or one of you to.
Well, Channing can answer because she wrote it. So
okay, all right.
Yeah, you helped shape this film, so you definitely can talk about this too. I'm sorry, everybody, I had to move outside so my daughter could play. But I think, we were always, and Neil, you were such a big part of this because Neil went through the Sundance Creative Producing Lab, and, they were talking about a lot of and I'll let you talk more about this, Neil, because I don't want to misquote anything, but there was really a focus on theme, in the film. And we really were navigating this idea of Juneteenth. And I'll just reiterate this just for people who haven't seen the film and are familiar. But Juneteenth is a day that commemorates the fact that the slaves in Texas didn't find out they were free until 2.5 years after everyone else. Their freedom was kept hidden from them. And when they finally found out they were free, it was a moment that they, discovered that they had been free for all this time. And, they had to figure out what that freedom meant to them and what was next. And so we were always navigating this idea of what happens for each of these characters when, their freedom, what happens when freedom comes too late. And we were asking that question thematically throughout the film, and we were also asking, what does freedom mean for each of these characters, and applying that to each of the characters' arcs. And so that definitely informed the film. And Neil, I'll turn it over to you just in case I've missed anything about that. But thematically, we definitely were navigating those things.
No, for sure. That was the big thing I thought was so cool about the movie, even when Channing first had the idea, is that you have characters living in the present who are navigating this bigger idea of what freedom looks like, and what happens when good news comes too late. And so that kind of mirrors the enslaved in Texas finding out they are free 2.5 years after everyone else, and then also Turquoise holding on to this old dream of being Miss Juneteenth and wanting things to have worked out for herself through her daughter. So I thought that just was such a great way to mirror like the history that I think, everybody, you don't just have to be a Texan or have to be a descendant of slaves, but just it's American history, this history that we're all kind of coming into awareness of, because of the current moment. But, if you're from Texas, you've known about Juneteenth. And if you're, a student of history, you've known about Juneteenth for decades, if not, your whole life. So I don't know. I thought that was something that was really cool. And it was great that you have this big historical idea framing a personal story, because then I thought it'd be helpful to kind of, really let you see how the interpersonal relationships were really defined by like these bigger systems, right? As well as like the individual choices the characters made, if that makes sense.
My question is, as far as Ronnie, what I think, one thing that I did like, because sometimes, Ant and I talked about this, is we have in these dynamics of men and women relationships, and especially in Black couples, where we want to villainize the man, but as if the woman had no say, no hand in choosing her partner. And not to give the movie away, but there is a part in the film where she does realize that she has some hand in this. This isn't just all Ronnie. This is continuous behavior, and that she, whether it's love, whether it's hope, or whatever you want to label it. Did you feel it was important for her to have some responsibility in that, which I thought was really good. And I loved how you did it, because you could have gone a whole different direction. Neil, did you have a hand in kind of saying, you know what, I understand where you're trying to go, but you can't just make him the villain, for lack of a better word, all the way? She had a hand in this. She was a willing participant in this.
I mean, Channing can talk about it, but I will say that all the producers, we had a great producing team. You'd read the script, and we always wanted to make sure that, like, Turquoise always had agency, and Channing wanted to make sure that too. So I mean, it's like Turquoise isn't a victim necessarily. She's someone who is making choices and is growing into being aware of those choices. But I mean, Channing was also crafting her to be that way as well. So that was something I think we didn't have to do too much of doing, but it was something that I was mindful of, like, hey, we always just want to track how she is making a decision and then dealing with the consequences of any of those decisions, whether it's, paying for the dress instead of something else or whatever,
No, for sure. Channing, what was your thought in just making sure that, because again, people treat you the way you allow them to treat you. So she definitely had a hand in this dynamic between the two of them.
Yeah, I think it's what you said earlier, Kathia, when you were talking about her being so fixed on these ideas, for what she wants for Kai and really for her life. And I think, we're coming into a moment, in her journey where she's, all these things are, creating the perfect storm for her to come into her own awareness. And, but just like Neil said, I think it was just important for her to keep her own agency. Like, we're walking through the journey with her and we're realizing these things as she is. And I think, Neil was so important for the story, because a lot of times in developing the film, it would be this idea of, we don't want to be ahead of her. We want to be with her. So it was a constantly navigating, the space to be with her. And also for Ronnie, I think it was entirely important, I think, for Neil to be involved, like at the development level, because for Ronnie, especially, he was giving, contributing to the Black male perspective, which is obviously not monolithic, but, he had the experiences of having been a Black man in America and could say, this is what I think about this. And, while I'm tracking Turquoise's experiences, having been a Black woman in America and especially in the South, so that was super helpful. I also think Neil talked about Kendrick Sampson earlier, and, he brought such, he was just wonderful in the role, I think, because he brought the nuance that I was looking for that particular role, in order, like, to just to see, also to be able to see some of Ronnie's own emotional journey in the film.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. I mean, I think you made, I said this to you before. What I respect so much about your point of view is that you didn't go for the easy grab. You conscientiously took these characters into directions where they kind of like had to acknowledge, for lack of a better word, their codependency. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. And just to call Neil out again, he's the son of two psychiatrists. So he was the sounding board a lot. We were tracking characters, so definitely I'm glad that came through, because we were constantly navigating that. And I think there was a fear too, like, will people get this? Will it make sense to people? So there was also, the film, I think, some of it, I think we found, at script level, you obviously find it during production. And then, there are things that get refined and taken away during the editing process. But, I think that we had really strong actors who really were able to lift these characters off the page, that enabled us to be able to, even pull away, I think, some things that were there at the script level, and because we just got it emotionally from the performance. So there's all these things that could happen, when you're making a film, but you try, I think, at the script level to make sure that things are understood, and that's what we were doing. But I think we got lucky in a way, because later we were like, okay, that's there, and I'm just happy to hear that you all got it too.
Yeah, like there were some scenes, and I'm not going to go too much into spoilers, but there are definitely scenes that were shot and were written that kind of gave you more clarity on like where Turquoise and Ronnie's relationship may end, or even some more scenes with how Ronnie parents and raises Kai. And it was crazy because you watch the movie and you get all these great performances and moments that you can't, like, you just see these actors together and they just have this spark and there's a dynamic. And all of a sudden you're like, wait, we don't need another scene of him raising Kai, because like he's doing a great job just in the way he's looking at her while they're dancing, and it's just, it's those kind of things that are really, really special.
Yeah, no, I think you guys did an amazing job with the casting, and you mentioned Kendrick, who plays Ronnie. I thought he did a great job, and him being from Houston, being able to bring that down south flavor. Nicole Bahari, I think she did a phenomenal job. So I want you guys to talk a little bit about just the casting process. How did you get Nicole into this? I mean, how did that? What was that process like for you guys? How did that flow?
Yeah, it was definitely, like I was mentioning earlier, we really were looking for actors who could bring a sense of nuance to these particular roles. And, I was learning the casting process as I was going along, really, because, we were really, thinking about what do we need from Turquoise? We need someone who can bring that nuance to the role, who can navigate this emotional journey. Turquoise was there in every scene. That was the way the script was built. The script was built really around her emotional journey. We were meant to be with her from the beginning, and I got to a place, it wasn't early on in the casting, but somewhere along the lines, I got to a place where it was important for me to see the actors in the roles before they were cast. Like, I have a theater background, and, it's important for me to like have actors that I can work with in particular that can bring, I keep saying this nuance, but, really who can bring as much meaning as possible to the performance, and Nicole Bahari is one of those actors whose work I was obviously familiar with in the past, and I got a chance to see her in the role of Turquoise, and I just got really excited because I saw that sense of nuance, and I saw, someone I felt like could really navigate this particularly emotional journey of like who Turquoise was. And so that was really, really exciting. I think she's definitely a brilliant actor, and I was excited because there was this thing that Turquoise goes through, the disappointments, for the people who haven't seen the film, like she's navigating this lost dream. But, most important for me was what I discovered is that we needed to see the joy between her and Kai. So that's how that came to be. And I think for me in particular, part of like who I am as a filmmaker, and especially as a human being, is I want to see more Black woman leads in front of the camera. And so, many times my stories are about, Black women taking a step forward in their journeys. And so it's important to me to be able to do that. I think also, like, as far as like casting the roles, I knew that I wanted these very, as a director, like I really try to bring about these very naturalistic performances. And so that's those.
No,
You can definitely. You talked about the bar, and I love the fact that you had a relationship with that venue, and that you said you worked there a couple of nights. And there are very specific things. I want to ask you about the people in that bar. Because I don't want to say characters because I don't want to sound like demeaning, but I mean characters in a good way because I feel like that made it more authentic. How did you, were they just people who regularly went to the bar that you, and they just said, okay, you said, oh, would you mind being in our film? And everything seemed very natural, from the line dancing, or we always have those folks that close down the bar, that open the bar and close down the bar. The one lady by the jukebox where it just, you couldn't help. I felt like visually you were looking and it's almost like you wanted to know more about who these regulars are, what type of drinks they serve. Was that one of the main reasons why you chose that bar, because you felt like it authentically spoke to that community?
I mean, yeah, the film was written around that bar. Like, it was always meant to be there. And it was a bar that I went to, coming up, and would just sit there and people watch. And the bar is like one of the places that inspired the film, because like the people there, I talked about a little bit earlier about Turquoise and, how I built her. But that, the sense of the film, the atmosphere itself really comes from the people there who are, dignified and gritty and graceful, if you can believe all those things together, and there's a sense of pomp and circumstance in the way they dress and the way they carry themselves, so that was always there. Like, I'm giving away some stuff, but the one scene that you see in the film where Turquoise is just watching the woman dance in the bar, that is a woman who, that was my moment, and sitting there that night watching her and thinking, my God, what, I get even a little emotional talking about it, but I looked at her and went, what resilience, like what beauty, and begged her to like be in the film. And she was just like, why do you want me in this film? I was like, you're stunning. I have to have you in this film. We have to figure this out. So, it absolutely informed the film. I mean, Neil could probably talk a little bit about trying to get people into the film as the producer, and working with people from this community aspect, because there really was a communal feel to the film, and we were working with the existing community to get them pulled in.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was fun. Like Channing said, the whole movie was really constructed around these locations. And so that bar, it never closes, which is great. But we really had to coordinate with the owner and say, hey, we want to come and shoot at certain times. And they were really, really gracious to let us come in. But I'll tell you, part of the responsibility then is, while we're shooting, making sure someone's at the door, like, hey, we're closed. Hey, they're closed for the week. They're closed for this time. But, while everybody would come by and, try to come in and get a beer or say, hey, can I get a beer in between your takes? You're like, no, we're closed. Like, we can't sell you this stuff. We tell them, okay, but if you come on Thursday night at this time, we'd love for you to be in the movie. And that was how a lot of the people kind of came in. We just would put signs up before we shot and say, hey, we're shooting here on this day, come in, be an extra, do whatever you do, And that was really great. And it really made it authentic. And like Channing said, we did a mood reel a few years ago. And that's where we just, took the camera out. Channing was working there sometimes. And a lot of those moments that you see either were in the mood reel or were characters who we met at the mood reel. And we said, that movie we've been talking about, we're shooting this Thursday, come in at this time. And they did. And it was great,
No,
so,
you definitely feel that. I mean, that absolutely led to the authenticity I think that I've felt in the film, and just the sights, the sounds, and got to mention even the smells for me, because it was just like that whole vibe. I'm like, I know they're cranking out some good barbecue in there. I mean, you feel that. So that was really dope, and I think you guys definitely got that across. So we talk about the bar and this community that Turquoise lives in. As a part of that community, we get a look, maybe for lack of better words, at a church in that community. How how important was it to have that represented? I guess is the way I would put it. How important was it to have the church represented in Turquoise's world?
I'm gonna let Channing answer this, but I'll start it, okay? Because we had a lot of talks about how we were representing the church, because everybody in the film has, either been in church or knew the church or was still in the church, and so we were actively like not wanting to say all church is this, but it was one of those things where we, and Channing kind of creating the character of Charlotte and just kind of the story she grew up around, she was like, yeah, like, this character Charlotte would be a character who would be in the church and have these other things going on, because she's working through her stuff too. She's not a perfect person at this moment. So it was always something that we were very mindful of, as far as just making sure that this was like a specific character who was going through something and this is how she was experiencing it. But, not to say like everybody in the, obviously in the church was doing that. Right. But it was interesting because I think too, like, we have, Reverend Patterson, who you see later, the Bacon's dad, so there's this whole theme of like church being there, and it's just a part of the culture as it is in the South. But it was really, really important that it was like a character thing. Like this mom who has these issues that we're revealing in the film, this is one way she's dealing with her situation and pulling someone in. And even Turquoise is kind of like, I don't think this is really what you think you're doing. Like she even can call it out. And that was important too, that it was like, specifically this character, here's what we're calling, this is what she's dealing with. And I think I empathize with Charlotte a lot, because I'm like, I think she's trying to work through what makes sense to her. And that was what she found. And it's not perfect, but she still is going to be that flawed person who goes to her daughter and says, now I got to use you to get what I want, to show people that I got it together, and,
Yeah.
Kind of crazy.
No, that was real, and it was. I mean, that was Turquoise's experience for with that particular church, and I saw it as no different than any of us, right? Nobody's perfect, all have flaws. I think she goes through it's almost like a cautionary tale of what a church experience in a community should not be, but recognize at the same time that that's not the only, right? That's not everyone's experience. And it
was and I thought it was kind of tough too, because it was like the ladies who, I mean, I don't want to give too much of the film away, but some of the other members of the church, like they're just like, to me, they're completely innocent in whatever that dynamic is between Charlotte and Turquoise. Like they're just, like it just. That was a big thing too. Like we just wanted to make sure it was really honing in on just Charlotte and Turquoise have this dynamic, and even if you are just worshiping in church, if they're around, like you're gonna kind of get into it, because that's just what they do. But it was something. I mean, Channing can speak to it. And hope I'm representing what you think, but I do. It was something we really talked a lot about, because we all grew up in the church, and it was like, we're not trying to say this is all church is,
Jenny, we're talking about how she is trying to reconcile with this newfound religious commitment to religion and her demons, and and how it comes out a little so, but she hasn't quite figured out how to tackle her demons. So can you talk a little bit about what was your inspiration in terms of like when you're writing the whole role of the church in there?
Yeah, I think Neil was pretty spot on with what he said, but I think, just to add, I think we were, in telling the story, I definitely was inspired by navigating this idea that we were talking about earlier thematically, like how does each character find their own sense of freedom? And, Charlotte, I think, is a character who's also reconciling her own past and, who she was, not just as a person, but as a mother, and we see that in her journey. And, I'm trying to I'm trying to walk carefully here for the people who haven't seen the film, because it's kind of one of those things that you discover, there's some things that you discover about her character. But I think, church for her is a safe place, and the place that is allowing her own sense of discovery, and she's protective of it in the film, and there's, I think, from Charlotte, there's this sense of judgment, and I feel like that judgment it comes from some of her own things that she's navigating in her own life, and her own insecurities about what she's been through and who she's been to Turquoise. And so we see that unfold in the film a bit. And just while we're on the subject of Charlotte, like, I would be remiss if I didn't Laurie Hayes, who played,
Oh no, she froze.
gotten a chance about on these conversations. Oh no, am I back? Can
Make sure you say the actresses that it's Laurie Hayes who plays Charlotte. I think you wanted to make sure that we gave Laurie her just due for her performance, which is also very, very good. And because again, it's hard to play. It's hard to convincingly play a person who's so complex and who's struggling and may not own up to the fact that she's struggling. So I think she did a fabulous job, because again, we could have just been like, we don't want to know more about this lady, but instead we're intrigued, and we want to know kind of like what, I mean, for me, and I don't know for Aunt, but for me, I wanted to know a little bit more what her backstory was, to kind of like, what was her relationship with her mother was like, to kind of like understand why she made the choices she made.
Am I back okay? Am I still frozen?
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, I mean, and the temptation was definitely there for me to want to be able to tell more of her story, but we really are there to be seeing what impact she has on Turquoise's journey, but you do see some of it in the film, just in their moments together. And I think when I was having a little technical difficulties, I was talking about Laurie Hayes, who plays Charlotte, and I haven't had a chance to really talk about her a lot in these conversations. And so I really want to acknowledge her, because like, she's another actor who I feel like brought, her own ideas about who this character was to the role, and really lifted it off the page, because she was so surprising for me in the auditions. She comes in and like, she's this really graceful, classically beautiful woman. And she comes in, and you could just, like, in the way that she portrayed the character, that you just feel like there's just something that's slightly off base, and it just, threw me, I think, as a director, and surprised me in a way. And I was like, oh yes, I could totally see her in this role. Like, she's amazing.
Awesome. Okay, just a quick announcement here for all of our viewers. Feel free to post questions. As a matter of fact, got one that just came in, and question is coming from John Clemens. His question is, what was the most challenging part of making the film, and why?
I think for me, probably, and Neil, you can speak to it, I think, from a different perspective, but I think for me, it was, I had a couple of challenges. I was a new mom, pretty much. My daughter turned 1 on set. So, it was being able to navigate being a mom myself, and telling this story about a mom, and, being as present as possible to both of those things. So, it was a challenge, but it was also a joy, because like, I made a decision that I was going to have my daughter there on set. We found a room in the production office, and, set up a place for her to be. And there were plenty of times where, she was in the ergo baby, on my chest in the baby carrier. And she really, am grateful for that, because I didn't want to miss any of her moments, and I also didn't want to, miss this important moment that we had in which to tell this story. The other, I think, challenging part of it for me was, having written such a personal film, that I wrote around the places and spaces that I grew up in, and that I wrote around, people that I was talking about, the sense of like community and the sense of like dignity and grit that I witnessed in people growing up. And so what was so challenging for me was to make sure that I maintained a level of authenticity in the film, and that I was able to respectfully be able to portray this community and portray the people of the community. So it was constantly navigating that and being firm about the story that I was telling, because I just, whether people got it or not, as we were telling the story, I was like, I know this community, I know this story, and I have to be firm in making sure that the elements that were, in the script make it to screen. And also, my idea of like who this community and these people are, because I was one of those. I'm part of that community, and I am one of the people in the community. And so it was important that I got it right.
I think, and so also want to say, it's our baby, because we had our baby on set, and so that was fun, and I'm grateful that we had her right there, and it was fun because it was like going back and forth, and like Channing would be doing takes, and we were fortunate to have help and support like on set a lot of times, but then other times I'd run off, and I think Zora had a cold at one point, so I'm taking her to the doctor, in the middle of some stuff. So it was good. It felt like a family thing, so that was really special. I think a challenge for me kind of piggybacks on Channing wanting to maintain the authenticity. I think a lot of times, and every film has this challenge, but so much of representing the community and that authenticity was a part of how this film was built. And so we're shooting in locations that aren't really designed to make movies, like we're figuring out, okay, like what does it look like to shut down a bar, and to shoot next to a highway that's going to have a bunch of cars sounding. It's like you want the authenticity, but you're also navigating, okay, what's the train schedule today? Okay, trains are coming, let's schedule this a different time of day. So all that stuff made the film special, I think, and unique. But it definitely was something, even in scheduling, it was like, we're going to have to kind of adapt to the world we're in, and to capture the world, right?
Yeah, no doubt. How long did it take you guys to shoot the film?
22 days, right? And then I think a day or two here or there, but it was 22 days to shoot it.
That's amazing. People don't realize that that's definitely not the norm, to shoot a film and to do something so meaningful. Talk a little bit about, and we have another question coming up soon too, the dynamic, because you're our husband and wife. So you mentioned your husband and wife, your new parents. It had to be interesting because it's hard when you are not husband and wife, but you're Neil and Channing, speaking as two creatives and being like, and feeling strongly, as you should, about your positions creatively. And how did you manage to be able to separate the two and say, okay, when we're on set, we're these two individuals, but when we say cut and we leave here, we can't bring what disagreement we had on set home over dinner. You know what I mean? You kind of got to leave it there. How are you managing that balance of working together and still being like, okay, we got to remember our marriage is important too?
I mean, you describe it in such a healthy way. I don't know that we ever got there. I think we were living the film. Like you're working like so many hours, and like I'm the director, he's the producer. So, we're first in, last out kind of thing, and that's why it was so important to have the baby with us, because we just couldn't be away from her for so many hours. But I think, Neil and I initially connected as collaborators. Like I mentioned earlier, we met at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles in film school. And we connected because we both discovered that we were wanting to tell stories about Black folks in the South, you know, that I think really focused on history and culture in some aspect, you know. And so we connected that way and started working on each other's projects. So we had a mutual respect for each other as artists first, you know. And we brought that respect over, I believe, you know, into our relationship. And so, you know, we find, I think, in our own way, a way to separate it. But I don't know if it's ever like this, you know, line that's like, you know, this black and white with no gray that says, you know, we can't talk about film. We end up talking about it no matter what. We've tried, I think, to say no talking about film after certain times, and it just like never works, you know. So I think there's just an ebb and flow. You know, when we were with the film, we were really busy in production, and then after the film, we took some time. We're like, we want to be here with our daughter, just experiencing, you know, being a family. But I think the respect is what carries us forward, and we're friends first.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that, like, for me, I knew when I came here, there was, like, when Channing told me the story and we went to the community where it was going to be filmed, I just knew that there was so much of a world here that it was about coming in and just kind of being in that world and seeing what the world told both of us. And so, you know, yeah, we'd have disagreements on how to achieve a certain moment, but ultimately it was like in service of the story, in service of Channing's vision, in service of the community. So there was never an argument that I was just like, this is not going to work at all. It just, you know, it'd be like, hey, I think, you know, we would describe it like, I think we can win this way. Like, this is a way to successfully show this community. And she'd say, well, maybe this way. And maybe there's a middle ground. Or sometimes it's like, this is what Channing thinks. Let's ride with what Channing thinks because she's from here. And like, I'm down with it, you know? So, I mean, you know, it was all love. Like, it was really a special thing to be able to work together. I will say that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, when you say that, like, that's one of the things that I always felt was really special about Neil too, was that, you know, as a Black woman, you know, writer, director, there's obviously unique challenges that come with that. And, you know, especially in telling stories, especially like the one that we're telling that really is focusing on Turquoise's journey that sometimes is internal, you know. Neil had a great respect for me, I think, as a filmmaker, and, you know, for the kind of stories that I wanted to tell. And so, you know, I'm really grateful for that, because I think that at the end of the day, he's my trusted person. He's going to be the first person that I show, you know, my ideas in early inception, not too early now. We still have some boundaries about that. You know, I've got to get the story out first, get that first rough draft out before I show him. But, you know, he's definitely my trusted person. And I'm grateful that we were able to discover that. That's one of the greatest things that I got from film school, is that relationship. Like, when people ask me about going to film school, I say, you know, one of the big things for me was being able to find a trusted partner that I could share, you know, my art with, and feel like that person would be able to protect it.
Definitely. I mean, I also, you know, I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but I want to shout out Denton Black Film Festival, because Channing and I's first time like collaborating was on her short film Red, which was shot in the same community. And then we followed up, and she produced a film that and starred in a film that I wrote and directed. And Denton Black Film Festival played both of those films a few years ago. So it's like definitely a full circle moment. We were so grateful to be programmed then and to get to go to Denton and hang out, and, you know, the hospitality we received then, it was just really special. So, you know, I think that's also kind of been the journey. Channing and I have like evolved together and grown together, and as artists and as people. So, you know, everything was definitely like, how do we tell these stories, like these stories we don't get to see often? How do you make a story about a woman in the South raising a kid in a pageant in a holiday that a lot of the world may not know about, but like, it means so much to both of us and so much to the communities we're from? And how do you give it the same respect that you give, you know, how do you make a film with that kind of respect? And that was always the driving force for both of us, I think, you know?
Yeah, big ups to Denton Black Film Festival. So we have one final question, and then we'll wrap. And this is coming from the chat as well in the comments. Question is, What's next for you guys? What's your next project?
Neil will kill me if I talk too much about it, but Neil has written his project and is directing his project next. And I'm going to be quiet because I guess that when y'all ask how we manage it, it's a couple of
I get it. I totally get it. That's fair.
Yeah, I mean,
um,
there's that one, and Channing has some stuff too that's like, you know, of the same world. I can't get into it, of the same world of Juneteenth, but that's another thing. I've not read anything. I hear ideas, and I'm just like, when can I read something?
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Very nice, very nice. So you get to be in the driver's seat, and she gets to be on you about budget and all that good stuff. So no, I mean, I think that is that shows how much you guys really are supportive of one another, and you know, speaking with you guys, we can see that in the work, you know, the trust factor and everything. And your daughter will have a lot of amazing stories to tell when she gets older. That type of thing. Are we ready for Linda, or did you have a question?
Yeah. No, I think we're ready for Linda. Just want to, you know, thank you guys again for taking the time out to chat with us. From Denton Black Film Festival to Kathia, Cup of Soul, to me, the movie brother. You got a platform with all of us. So, you know, as things progress in your projects, get at us and let us know. But with that said, going to turn things over to Linda, and she's gonna wrap us up.
Big boss.
Thank you so much for having us here.
Yeah, thank you guys.
I know. I want to thank you all so much, to our guests, Shannon and Neil. We'll be watching out for the things that you weren't talking about today, but the things that you've got planned for the future. We'll definitely keep our ears to the ground. And I hope you'll keep in touch with us. And I want to thank our co-host, Ant and Kathia. Thank you for doing such a wonderful job in this conversation with Neil and Shannon. And I want to especially thank those of you in the audience for tuning in. Those of you who may not have attended the Denton Black Film Festival before, and as a reminder of the great time we had in January, we just want to play a short recap video. As we're busy planning for 2021, we're not quite sure what that will bring, if it'll be a virtual festival, a hybrid festival, or what we normally are able to do. But we did want to share with you a short recap video of the wonderful time we had this January. We've still got a problem with sound. But I think visually you can still get a gist of all the different elements of the Denton Black Film Festival, which is, we consider, a cultural festival. And at the festival, of course, we have music, all elements of storytelling, whether it's dance, music, spoken word, all of those things. So we hope that you'll come and join us this year. Well, this next year, actually. So I'm going to ask you to be sure and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And on our website at dentonbff.com, you can sign up for our mail list to keep up with all of the things that we have happening. And in fact, on July 22nd, the DBFF Institute presents an Actors Roundtable from 6 to 7:50 Central Time. That's July 22nd. And on August 20th at 6 p.m., in honor of the anniversary of the March on Washington, DBFF will be hosting In My Voice. It's an open mic showcasing spoken word performances from young adults. It'll be held live on Facebook and YouTube. So we hope you'll join us for these events, and Keep checking us out for other things that we'll be doing as well. So at this point, we're signing off and just hoping that you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you for tuning in.